Welcome. I'm E.G. Marshall. I remember when I was in high school, I studied a poem which struck terror to my heart. I still recall the opening lines, which went, I fled him down the nights and down the days. I fled him down the arches of the years. I fled him down the labyrinthine ways of my own mind. Some of you will recognize the author as Francis Thompson and the poem as the Hound of Heaven. And it's still terrifying. But think how much more fearful it would be if the hound you were fleeing from was a hound of hell.
Good Lord! What's that?
I don't know, Sir Henry. Some sound they have on the moor, I think.
Don't coddle me, Watson. When the people of the moor hear that cry, what do they say it is?
They say it's the cry of the Hound of the Baskervilles, seeking its prey.
Our mystery drama, The Hound of the Baskervilles, was especially adapted from the Sherlock Holmes classic for the Mystery Theater by Murray Burnett and stars Kevin McCarthy. It is sponsored in part by General Electric Citizen Band Radios and Buick Motor Division. I'll be back shortly with Act One. The mantle of immortality is elusive and unpredictable. Two fictional characters, created at the turn of the century by Arthur Conan Doyle, have become undying legends. So strong is the public belief in their existence that the City of London recently granted the owner of the premises at 221B Baker Street the right to change the number of that address permanently in order to avoid the hordes of tourists flocking to see the actual living quarters of Sherlock Holmes and his colleague, Dr. Watson. Our story today starts in those very rooms in the year 1902.
My training as a medical man made me an early riser. Sherlock Holmes wasn't. On this morning, my friend was at the breakfast table while I was intently examining a cane that had been left behind by a visitor who had missed us last night.
Well, Watson, what do you make of it? You've been looking at the cane for some time. Since we've been so unfortunate as to miss the owner and have no notion of his errand, this accidental souvenir carries some importance. Let me hear you construct the man by an examination of it.
Well, very well, Holmes. Really, it's child's play to read that the man's name is James Mortimer, that he's a physician. But I would go further and say he's an elderly country practitioner who does a great deal of his visiting on foot because the end of this stick is very heavily worn down.
Excellent, Watson.
Now, the stick was given to him by the Friends of the CCH, which I take to be the Something Hunt, a local group to whom he's possibly given some assistance. Now, has anything escaped me?
Now, here, let me have a look at it, Watson.
Well, I trust there's nothing of importance I've overlooked.
No, Watson. This man is certainly a country practitioner who walks a great deal.
Then I was right.
To that extent. But since we know that the man is a doctor, is it likely that presentation to him would come from a hospital rather than a hunt? And when we see the initials CCH, does not Charing Cross Hospital leap to the mind? Can we not also infer that such a presentation would be made at the time he left? Perhaps to practice in the country. And since the date is on the stick, and it's only 5 years ago, it's highly unlikely that an elderly, well-established physician would go into country practice. So, we now have a young fellow, amiable, unambitious, and possessor of a favorite dog, which I should say is larger than a terrier and smaller than a mastiff.
Come, Holmes. Well, the dog is too much.
No, not at all. If you'll observe these tooth marks in the middle of the stick, where the dog has been accustomed to carry it. The dog's jaw is too broad for a terrier and not quite broad enough for a mastiff. It may well be. It is. A curly-haired spaniel.
My dear Holmes, how can you possibly be so sure
For
of
the
that?
very simple reason that I see the dog itself on our doorstep. And there is the ring of its owner, and we shall soon discover why he has come to see us.
The appearance of our visitor was a surprise to me because although Holmes had correctly deduced his age, his back was already bowed, and he walked with a forward thrust of his head. As he entered, his eyes fell upon the stick in Holmes's hand, and he ran to it with an exclamation of joy.
Ah, I'm so very glad. I wouldn't want to lose that stick for the world.
Presentation, I see.
Yes, indeed.
From Charing Cross Hospital?
From some friends there on the occasion of my marriage.
Ah, dear, that's bad.
I beg your pardon. Why was that bad?
Well, only that you've disarranged our little deductions. We had surmised that you left the hospital.
Oh, and so I did. Immediately upon my marriage.
Ah.
It was necessary to make a home for my wife.
Well, we weren't so far wrong after all. And now, Dr. Mortimer, I think it wise if you'll tell me what the exact nature of the problem is in which you ask my assistance.
And then, to my astonishment, the physician took a worn and ancient manuscript from his pocket and read to us a most horrifying tale concerning the manor of Baskerville, located in Devonshire, and the origin of a curse on the Baskerville line. The manuscript told of the abduction of a young girl on Michaelmas Eve and locking her up in Baskerville Hall. The girl, being both courageous and ingenious, dared to escape from an upper floor by clambering down the ivy and then setting off across the moors towards her home.
Upon discovering that the maiden had indeed escaped, Hugo Baskerville became as one possessed, and he cried aloud before his companions that very night he would render his body and soul to the powers of evil if he might overtake the girl with the hounds he would set upon her.
Excuse the interruption, Doctor, but you're certain of the authenticity of this document?
Oh, absolutely, Mr. Holmes. It's in the form of a letter from the third Hugo Baskerville to his sons, explaining why they should fear going out on the moors at night.
I see. I presume that manuscript gives a reason.
Oh, it most certainly does. The Hound. The Hound of the Baskervilles. If you let me continue. Hugo's companions, riding after him across the moors, came upon a night shepherd, a man so crazed with fear that he could scarce speak. He told the riders that he'd not only seen the maid running for her very life, but also Sir Hugo on his black mare and running mute behind him, such a hound of hell as God forbid should ever be at my heels. When I come to the close, Mr. Holmes, it says here that 3 riders came upon the body of the maid, dead from fatigue and fear, and also the body of Sir Hugo Baskerville, with a great black beast, larger than any mortal hound, ravening at Sir Hugo's throat with its jaw dripping blood. Well, such is the tale, my sons, of the coming of the Hound, which is said to have plagued the Baskerville family so sorely ever since. Well, Mr. Holmes, would you find it interesting?
Only to a collector of fairy tales.
Well, then how would you classify this newspaper account in the Devon County Chronicle of 3 weeks ago?
3 weeks ago. Regrettable death of Charles Baskerville. Body found at Fane Dew Alley of Baskerville Hall. Pronounced dead by his friend and physician, James Mortimer. That's you. Coroner's verdict, cardiac exhaustion. Despite some strange aspects of the death... Well, now, Dr. Mortimer, everything seems straightforward, but evidently you entertain some doubts in the matter. Something you didn't state to the press or at the inquest?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. When I first saw the body, Sir Charles lay upon his face, his arms out, fingers dug deep into the ground, and his features convulsed into such a grimace of terror that I, his best friend and physician, hardly recognized him.
Dear me. No physical injuries?
None. But although Harrison, the caretaker who found the body, said he saw no traces at all upon the ground, I did, Mr. Holmes, I did.
Footprints?
Footprints.
A man's or a woman's?
Neither. They were the tracks of a gigantic hound.
And your reason for withholding this information at the inquest?
Because the people of the countryside do not share your opinion about the curse hanging over the Baskerville family. Sir Charles himself believed in it, and I certainly had no wish to add fuel to the flames. Besides...
Yes?
Well, there's a realm in which the most acute and most experienced of detectives is helpless.
You mean the supernatural? Well, I confine my investigations to this world, and I cannot understand why you are now consulting me.
But I came to ask your advice about what I should do with the heir, the new Sir Henry Baskerville, who arrives in Waterloo Station in exactly 1 hour.
Meet him, take him to a good hotel, and both of you come back here tomorrow at noon.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, This is Sir Henry Baskerville.
How do you do? I'm all at sea. I have been ever since I got the news of my uncle's death and my inheritance. I had no idea Uncle Charles was so well fixed.
Dr. Mortimer, as the executor of the estate, can you tell us, are there any other claimants?
No, sir. And then this morning, I find this note at my hotel, and one of my brand new boots is missing.
May I see the note?
Of course. Dime novel stuff, if you ask me.
As you value your life or reason, keep away from the moor. We must all agree there's nothing supernatural about this. Now, the missing boot?
A brand new pair. I bought them just yesterday. Left them outside my hotel door to be polished, and one of them's gone this morning. I can only tell you that there is no devil in hell and no man upon earth who can prevent me from going to the home of my own people.
And so it was arranged that on Saturday I was to accompany Sir Henry and take up residence with him at Baskerville Hall, because Holmes was insistent that someone be with Sir Henry at all times. When Holmes and I called to pick up Sir Henry at his hotel Saturday, we found the young baronet in a rage.
I won't be played for a sucker in this hotel.
You still haven't located your boot, Sir Henry?
But this is a different one.
What?
I got the other one back, and now I'm missing an old black one. I'm beginning to think this hotel is nothing but a den of thieves.
I think it's very odd and damnably dangerous.
Mr. Holmes, if you know something, you should inform us so that we may...
Dr. Mortimer, I know only that you were concerned about the safety of Sir Henry, and quite rightly so. I also know that someone knew that you were in this hotel and saw fit to warn you to keep away from Baskerville Hall and the moor. And we all know that there were extremely suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Sir Charles Baskerville. I therefore suggest that anything out of the ordinary, such as the curious incidents with the boots, must be taken very seriously.
Well, surely you must be joking about the boots, Holmes. I fail to...
My dear Watson, did you bring your revolver as I asked?
Well, of course.
Good. Carry it at all times.
Well, I confess your instructions are making me nervous.
They should have precisely the opposite effect. Now, Dr. Mortimer, as executor of Sir Charles' will, you know the exact amount of the estate. Is it considerable?
Well, I should say that a sum in excess of £740,000 is indeed considerable.
Dear me. Dear me. That is a stake for which a man might well play a desperate game. In the event something happens to Sir Henry, who stands to inherit?
A distant cousin named James Desmond. And if you have any suspicions in that direction, let me inform you, he's a clergyman in his 70s.
Thank you. Now, Watson, I want complete and daily reports from you. When the crisis arises, as it surely will, I will direct you how to act. Now, gentlemen, goodbye and Godspeed.
Ever since I was old enough to read, I have delighted in the adventures of Sherlock Holmes and his bumbling but lovable colleague, Dr. Watson. The game is afoot, and we'll be back shortly with Act Two. One of our most successful writers of modern detective stories once made a terrible pun, but a perceptive comment on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stories about Sherlock Holmes. It went this way. Be they ever so humble, there's no police like Holmes. I agree wholeheartedly. And now we have the pleasure of rejoining Dr. Watson, Sir Henry Baskerville, and Dr. James Mortimer in the wagonette, carrying them and their luggage across the moors on the way to Baskerville Hall.
Hello, look at that, Sir Henry and Watson. I believe it's a mounted soldier with a rifle. Pull up, driver. Pull up.
Not to worry, sir. He's on the watch for a convict escaped from Princeton. The farmers here don't like it. He's a man that will stop at nothing. It's Sheldon, the Notting Hill murderer. I gave an involuntary shudder. It was a case Holmes had taken an interest in because of the ferocity of the man, Sheldon, who escaped the death penalty only because his atrocious conduct had led to doubts about his sanity. As I shivered, the wagon swept onto a long driveway where stood a huge building with mullioned windows. Standing in front of the large, heavy door was an angular woman with deep-set eyes which blazed with fanatic fire.
Welcome to Baskerville Hall, Sir Henry. I'm Mrs. Harrison, the caretaker's wife. My husband will be here shortly. He joins with me in wishing you a long, happy life and in begging you to avoid the moor, particularly in those hours of darkness when the powers of evil are exalted.
The very next morning, I set out to explore the moor by daylight. As I walked along a gray and lonely road, wishing that Holmes were here to help me, my thoughts were interrupted by a man calling my name.
Dr. Watson. Dr. Watson.
Yes, sir.
I'm Stapleton. I just live down the moor at Merripit House. Most of the folks around here call me an eccentric because of my hobby. I'm a naturalist.
I can see that from your net and box. But how do you know me?
Oh, no mystery about that. You passed Dr. Mortimer's house a short way back. He pointed you out to me as you passed. As our road lay the same way, I thought I'd overtake you and introduce myself. How is Sir Henry? None the worse for his journey, I trust?
Well, he's very well, thank you.
Not afraid of living down here after the sad death of Sir Charles?
That is of some concern to you, sir.
Well, it means a great deal to the countryside to have a wealthy man such as Sir Henry with us. Well, I'm glad to hear he has no superstitious fears of the fiend dog, which is supposed to haunt the family.
I don't believe he has. How do you stand on the matter?
I'm a scientist. But it's extraordinary how credulous the farmers are. Any number of them are ready to swear they've seen such a creature on the moor.
And you haven't?
Of course not. Although I have no doubt the story led to Sir Charles's tragic end.
Indeed. Why do you think that?
Well, Sir Charles had a vivid imagination and a diseased heart. His nerves were so on edge that the appearance of any dog at all at night near the yew alley might well have triggered a fatal heart attack. You agree?
Well, I've come to no conclusions.
Quite so. Well, if you care to come along with me to Merripit House, I'll introduce you to my sister.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Tell me what you think of the moor.
Well, this morning's my first venture on it. But that large plain to the north looks like a fine place for a gallop on a horse.
That thought has already cost several lives, Dr. Watson.
What? That seems hard to believe.
You see those bright green spots scattered thickly over it?
Yes. Yes, they seem more fertile than the rest.
Well, you might say that. But in reality, that's the great Grimpen Mire. One false step for man or beast, and you die slowly and agonizingly in the quicksand. An awful place, Doctor. And yet, I find my way to the very heart of it safely.
Why would you want to go to such a place?
That's where the rarest plants and butterflies are. And I have the wit to reach them.
Good Lord, what was that?
The natives say it's the Hound of the Baskervilles calling for its prey.
Well, you don't believe that, do you?
Perhaps it's the mud settling in the bog. Excuse me, but unless I'm mistaken, there's a purple hair streak. Ah, very rare. I'll join you at Merripit House. You can't miss it.
Stapleton was off with amazing speed and agility. To my dismay, the creature fluttered straight for the great mire. But Stapleton never paused for a moment. I stood watching him and then turned to find a woman near me upon the path. Slim, elegant, with a sensitive mouth and dark, eager eyes.
Go back. Go straight back to London. Instantly. Instantly.
What? Why? I mean, why should I go back?
I cannot explain, but do what I ask. Go back and never set foot on this moor again.
But I have just only come.
Can't you tell when a warning is for your own good? Get away from this place immediately.
But, ma'am,
Brother's coming back. Don't say a word.
Hello, Beryl.
Well, Jack, you're very warm and out of breath, I see. What was it this time?
Purple hair streak. Seldom found in the late autumn. Pity I missed him. You've introduced yourselves, I see.
Yes, sir. I was telling Sir Henry that it was rather late for him to see the true beauties of the moor.
You think he's Sir Henry Baskerville?
Of course.
Oh, no, ma'am. I'm only a humble commoner. My name is Dr. Watson.
Oh, we've been talking at cross purposes.
Well, you've not had very much time for talk.
Well, I merely mean that I talked as if Dr. Watson were a resident instead of a visitor.
I chose this out-of-the-way spot to settle down in, Doctor, because it offers an unlimited field of work in the areas of botany and zoology. Dr. Mortimer is a learned man, and Sir Charles was also an admirable companion. We knew him well, missed him. Of course, we miss our boys, too, don't we, Beryl?
Most certainly.
Your boys?
Yes, I had a school in the North Country. However, serious epidemic broke out and 3 of the boys died. School never recovered from the blow.
Well, I feel I should be getting back to the hall.
Well, as you wish. Do you think we'd be intruding if Beryl and I were to call this afternoon and make the acquaintance of Sir Henry?
I'm sure Sir Henry would be delighted. I set off rapidly upon the same path by which we'd come. But there must have been some shortcut, because before I'd reached the road, I was astounded to see Miss Stapleton sitting upon a rock by the side of the track.
Oh, I've run all the way in order to cut you off, Dr. Watson, and to tell you to forget what I said. I must not stop, or my brother will miss me.
Now, hold on a moment, please. Sir Henry's welfare is a close concern of mine. Why were you so eager he should leave here?
Well, my brother and I were very much shocked by the death of Sir Charles. We all know the story of the Hound, and I felt he should be warned.
But the Hound's story is nonsense.
No, I happen to believe it. Now, I must go back.
No, just one more question. Why did you not wish your brother to know about the warning?
My brother's most anxious to have the hall inhabited. He thinks it is for the good of the people here. He'd have been angry if he knew I'd urged Sir Henry to leave.
My dear Holmes, I am writing to report that I have solved one riddle, only unfortunately to come up with another. You may recall my mentioning to you that I believed I heard a woman sobbing during the first night I spent at Baskerville Hall. I mentioned this to Sir Henry, and we agreed that if I heard anything this night, I should wake him and we would investigate together. Along about 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard stealthy footsteps going past my door. I was out of bed in a flash and waited until they'd passed. I went to Sir Henry's room and tapped softly our prearranged signal.
Yes? You heard something, Watson?
Footsteps.
No sobbing?
No. The footsteps passed my door and went down the